Hey guys, this is Liv here, and in today's video, we're going to be going over every single dragon type in competitive Pokemon. If you guys enjoy this and you want to see more tier list content like this, like and subscribe, and answer the comment question of the day. What is your favorite dragon to use in competitive Pokemon? Mine honestly has been Hydreigon this generation, but it's not really one I would think of as a dragon anymore because you're typically never actually using it as a non-Terramon. It's always as a steel type or a fire type more than it actually gets usage as a dragon. But let me know your guys' answers below. With that said, let's get started on the tier list. So starting off in S tier, as always, we put our obligatory Arceus as the definitive S tier mon, which essentially shows a Pokemon that should be so versatile, so incredible on teams that you always benefit from running his Pokemon. Essentially, it's the no drawback Pokemon is what end up in the S tier. The A tiers are going to be for Pokemon that are still really strong in the metagame. You might build a team around these, but you don't necessarily have to. But these are ultimately Pokemon that are still just really good, but they might have some flaws. B tier is going to be for Pokemon that you'll still see when laddering pretty, like, I would say within like every 3 or 4 games, you'd probably find one. They're still going to be common enough. You should still be prepared for these Pokemon, but they're not necessarily something that you would jump to immediately. The C tier is going to be for more niche stuff. They fill a specific role. They counter some sort of mon really well. They do something objectively well enough to get in this tier over the D tier, which the D tier is really just for the YouTuber mons. These are the mons you might see me run on a team for the thumbnail because no one else is really running it and I want to showcase it before anyone else does, but they're not really a mon that I would say you should be bringing to like a regional or like an online tournament if you're trying to see some success. Meanwhile, the F tier is actually not going to matter for dragons. However, we will need an S plus tier. Because the S plus tier is going to be for Pokemon that you genuinely actually hurt yourself not running. That's what this tier needs to be. There are dragons that actually do fit this role. We'll actually start off with those because there are literally 2 of them. And spoilers for anyone, I guess, who somehow didn't think that the box art legends for this generation would end up in this tier. Oh my god, look at this S plus Giratina and Hydreigon. Shocker. No, these 2 are fucking brain dead. Realistically, the only reason you would not run one of these is because you're running the other one and you don't want to stack weaknesses to Fae. That's really the only reason you would not run both of these Pokemon. Like, objectively, these are 2 of the best box arts we've gotten in a long time. Miraidon definitely is like a top 5 Pokemon lifetime, and I would argue Koraidon is as well. I think the one exception you can maybe make is that certain Arceus forms, and I mean like a couple of Arceus forms, give Koraidon competition, and I'm talking about like normal and maybe fairy and ground. Maybe. Even still, I wouldn't say it's a definitive. Definitely a Pokemon that's at least on, like, both of these are definitely on par with like Pedon level at least. I would say that Miraidon probably rivals Mega Ray. I still think Zacian Ground even now is better than it. But you can make the case that this is better. Like, I think they're close enough in skill. Koraidon's still definitely top 5 though. Like, realistically, you definitively should, when these Pokemon are legal, be running at least one of these on every single team. The only exception would be if something that is currently not slated for the current home release for 1.2 were to somehow be added to the DLC and get such a massive buff to outclass these Pokemon. And I'm talking about to a degree where you would literally never want to run these Pokemon, considering their abilities are absurd, their stats are absurd, both 135 in their primary offense as well as speed. Like, these Pokemon are genuinely fucking nuts. Koraidon, while its ability doesn't boost stab like Miraidon's does, at the same time, you do get really good coverage for a neutral way to hit fairies with Sun boosted Flare Blitz, which is fucking insane. Meanwhile, Miraidon boosts its electric stab even further, and electric and dragon is already such a hard type to switch around. These 2 are objectively Pokemon you would actually be hurting a team by not running. You would objectively be at a disadvantage any game unless if you specifically pick 2 mons to counter both of these Pokemon. Not one, both of these. And I'm talking like Xerneas Kyogre levels of countering. And I solely mentioned Xerneas Kyogre just to clear the fucking weather while still having a fucking Xerneas that would probably need to have a Terra Ground on it to 50-50 Miraidon. So objectively, both of these are S+. Dragonite's an S tier. One of the better Terra users right now, actually. This thing also has a plethora of items, whether it's Assault Vest, Life Orb, Lumberry, Weakness Policy, Choice Band. I don't think I mentioned Choice Band weirdly enough. The point being though is this can make a lot of items work. We've even seen like Sharp Beak work recently. I'm pretty sure that like top cut of regional or something, or maybe no, I think it was on the winning Dragonite team actually from regional. I'd have to double check, but if I remember correctly, This was, I think it was like a Series 1 winning team from like Liverpool. I think this was the Liverpool Dragonite. Yeah, it was Sharpie, right? No, it was a Sylvest. Okay, so close. There was definitely a Sharpie Dragonite that did work recently. I'm spacing on where, but there definitely was a Sharpie Dragonite. The point being, it's less so about the items. This thing just has a lot of them. It also has a lot of good Terra types, whether it's Steel, Normal, Fire, Flying. Like you have a lot of different Terra options in Dragonite. It's one of the most diverse Terra users right now, in my opinion. I think there's maybe a handful that have slightly more versatility, but they are mostly dragons for what it's worth. Definitely still one of the most, for sure. I think it would be like Roaring Moon, maybe Baxcalibur, maybe Hydreigon's about as even, to be completely honest. And then I'd probably say like Gendozo is like the only other Pokemon that actually rivals it in Terra versatility. And that's probably about it. Everything else like has, actually, you know what? Rotoms also have a lot of fucking diversity, but it's more so dependent on the form. Like each form probably is about like 4 different Terras. So again, it gets around Dragonite, but very few Pokemon actually pass Dragonite in terms of Terra versatility, which is incredible for this Pokemon, especially in the ladder usage, because you don't really know what you're gonna get into with Dragonite. Typically with a team, the meta centralized enough to where, like with a Garchomp, for example, I'd expect that I'm playing one of Ground or Steel in any given situation, and it's a fairly reasonable prediction to make. With Dragonite, you don't really have that luxury though, so definite S tier for sure. Altaria is a D tier. While this Pokemon didn't gain a lot, one of the big things this actually gained this generation was Will-O-Wisp, which actually helps this a lot in terms of carving out a niche for this format. Will-O-Wisp is one of the most valuable statuses. In fact, I would argue personally the most valuable, unless you're counting T-Spikes as a separate status from Poison, which really it's just T-Spikes that are carrying Poison right now in terms of why it's so good, and it's specifically for Dozo teams. Whereas Will-O-Wisp, I think, is generally just a blanket better status condition right now. This is really useful for stuff like Roaring Moon, Iron Hands, Great Tusk. It's forcing a lot of Terra Fires on these physical attackers, in fact, which is really good. It gives a nice niche to Altaria. Not only this, but the Cloud9 actually can help a lot against potential Paradox Pokemon, and you could utilize the Terra set, weirdly enough, in tandem with like Tailwind and Will-O-Wisp to actually kind of give Altaria some niche. It also gets Haze for Dozo, which is kind of unique. Perish Song as well, so it stacks that similar to... in fact, I think it's one of the only Pokemon that gets the combination of Haze and Perish Song. Nope, Gengar and Honchkrow are like literally the only two, and I guess Murkrow by extension. So it's in a fairly limited pool of Pokemon. This also gets Will-O-Wisp, which literally only Gengar actually can say it does as well. The difference being, though, is this also can clear Sun from Paradoxes, so it has enough of a niche. I would argue you might even be able to give this thing a C tier. But for now, until I see actual track records from this Pokemon, I'm going to give it the D tier. I will say, though, there's an Altaria team, funny enough, on VGC Pace. I swear, I definitely saw it around. Oh, you know what? No, it wasn't on VGC Pace. I saw this on YouTube when scrolling for Sandy Shocks to the Spathria teams, funny enough, for yesterday. So the point being, though, is that Altaria definitely, I think, isn't even the worst dragon right now, but it's definitely a YouTuber mon for sure. Salamence gets an A tier, definitely outclassed by Dragonite as far as the Dragon Flying type Pokemon go, but they do very different roles. Typically, Salamence is meant to be more of an Intimidate, well, the thing is Dragonite's meant to be more of a bulky setup option. Mence is more so meant to just be a better support Pokemon. You're running stuff like Tailwind on this, you're running stuff like Heat Wave, and you're maybe using it as more of a special option. You might be going for just really bulky set. Terra Steel is a lot better on this Pokemon than Dragonite, I would argue. The point being, though, is that I think Salamence is just a little bit worse right now because of how good Dragonite is, and typically you're never running 2 of these Pokemon at the same time. You're barely able to justify 4 times Ice Beak Dragons. You're definitely not running 2 of them that have the outright same base typing. And while they don't do the exact same role for a team, in a lot of cases their roles overlap, and Dragonite will typically do them better, and also just be a lot more sustainable despite not really running recovery. I feel like Dragonite's bulk with stuff like AV and multi-scale just is a lot easier to pull off than Salamence's. So we're going to give Salamence A tier. Rayquaza? Rayquaza is a tricky one. So Rayquaza on paper is a pretty decent Pokemon. However, VGC for its tournament formats never actually does more than 2 restricteds, which puts Rayquaza in a very difficult position tiering-wise. As I said, there was going to be some controversial box set rankings, and Rayquaza, objectively speaking, is a great Pokemon. However, when you compare this with Rayquaza specifically, you do kind of need to compare it in the box set realm, where at least with Arceus, you can suspend disbelief in its viability because of the fact that the only format the Mythicals have been allowed in didn't restrict how many of them you could run. So in Arceus's case, you could in theory just run Arceus Dragon with one of these other dragons and still run it with like a Xerneas or something else. That would be fine. In Rayquaza's case though, technically speaking, in an actual official format, like in a format specifically you would be competing at like a Worlds with, right? We've never actually seen more than 2 of these allowed. So for Rayquaza's case, this is actually a bit of a different scenario than our typical Arceus tierings. And with that in mind, Rayquaza starts to fall a bit flat. 95 speed isn't that impressive. U-turn is a pretty nice buff for Ray. In fact, it did get a few nice buffs for sure this format. Some other things Rayquaza got were Wild Charge, but it lost one of the best moves that it had, V-Create, which is truly a huge nerf for Rayquaza. This took out a lot of viability for Rayquaza considering how damning of a move this was offensively. So honestly, I think I'm going to give Rayquaza the B tier. I feel like you'd be a lot better off running Dragonite. I think you would even make a case for Mence being more viable because it's outpacing and at worst tying a lot of common box arts. In fact, it's tying Palkia, it's outpacing like half the box art metagame. Even if we include the ones that have not yet returned, it's outpacing a good amount of them. So Rayquaza though, I mean, it outpaces some of them, but it's getting outpaced by mons like Palkia, Palkia Origin as well. You're getting outpaced by stuff like Xerneas. You're tying the Kyurem forms. Like this is a pretty bad generation for Rayquaza. And truthfully, you could probably even make a case for C tier. In fact, oh wait, no, they cut Scale Shot too, didn't they? Because I was gonna say you could maybe make a case at least for like Banded Ray or like Swords Dance Ray. But no, Swords Dance Ray also got kind of fucked. You really do need this thing on like a Prankster Tailwind team, funny enough, which is kind of okay right now. But the Prankster mons that would support Ray really well, I don't think we have them, is the thing. So honestly, I'm gonna keep it in B for now, but this might go down to C tier, I can't lie. Garchomp definitely gets an S tier. Incredible typing, great speed at 102, just barely outpacing mons like Volcarona, Salamence, etc. On top of this as well, Rough Skin's a great ability. This is a pretty decent offensive Pokemon too, and I think that the metagame really appreciates Garchomp's presence. Despite the fact that we got a really strong dragon that's also objectively faster and stronger in Roaring Moon. At the same time though, Garchomp is still proven to be really good. Well, I say stronger, but Roaring Moon isn't that much stronger. It's only like 9 base stronger. The thing is though, is that Ground is a lot better of a secondary type in this format than Dark is, just because of how few good grounds we have, whereas for Dark types, we have a lot of really good Darks. If we compare the grounds versus Dark types, for Darks, we have Bonnet, we have Grimmsnarl, we have Jugulus, we have Hydreigon, we have Murkrow, though Murkrow doesn't really count for what you need a Dark to do offensively. We have Tyranitar. I would even count Umbreon in this conversation, despite not being an offensive Dark. It still does really well. Kingambit obviously is really good. So Meowscarada is also really good. Like Roaring Moon has a lot of competition with that Dark typing. But if we look at actually good ground types, right? So we have Garchomp, we have Gastrodon, we have Great Tusk, and we have Sandy Shocks. And that's it. That's it. So Garchomp's in a fairly unique pool with that ground typing, and also the fact that it gives a really good spread option, whereas you're not really seeing that with Dark. So honestly, I'm gonna give Garchomp the S tier. I think it deserves it. Dialga. So Dialga definitely is not going to be as good this generation as it was in the last gen. Last generation, Dialga was an amazing Dynamax option, actually, and there's a really good Trick Room Pokemon as well. This is great for abusing weakness policy sets, and while it's not a bad Pokemon necessarily this format, I think you could get a lot out of using Dialga as like a Trick Room setter, and just maybe going for like a bulkier Trick Room team. The typing is fairly appreciated. I just think this is a pretty bad generation for Dialga, all things considered. You would definitely want to run this thing in tandem with a Kyogre for sure, and I think that Kyogre Dialga will still see some play, but ultimately I'm gonna give Dialga also the B tier. I think it'll be a cool Terramon, but at the same time though, I think realistically you're just gonna tear this into pure Steel type, and I think there are better steals for it even in the current metagame for box arts. So I'm gonna give it the B tier. In all honesty, I think you could maybe make a case for A tier Dialga. I wouldn't necessarily disagree entirely, but I don't know, I'm not really too convinced this right now. I think we currently already do have better options. In fact, speaking of, we have Dialga Origin. Now, the Origin form of Dialga, unlike Giratina, actually is not required to hold its item, as far as we are currently aware. This has been tested in unreleased versions where people have hacked in Dialga and changed its form. Apparently, it's key item based. I'm not 100% sure on that one, but that's what's going around currently. Now, this might change in 1.2. They might change the item from a key item to like a health item slot. They might change it to where Dialga needs to be holding this, or maybe where, like, I don't know. The point being is that Dialga Origin, as of right now, is slated to be able to hold items, which is better. Dialga Origin loses 20 attack for Spadef, and honestly, I think this helps actually a lot, because a lot of the checks you would typically be thinking of for dragons and steels, there's stuff like fire types, for example. Grounds are like the one physical type. That's the thing too, is a lot of special attackers are typically a little harder to counter in VGC without throwing on an assault vest, because it's really the one way to counter them with that like snarl. Whereas intimidators, will-o-wisp mons, you have a lot of options for physical attackers. So I think that dropping Dialga's physical attack by 20, which it wasn't using anyway for Spadef, will actually help it a lot, in my opinion. And I think it is a nice enough bump to Dialga Origin to barely put it in the A tier. I think it just is currently the better Dialga. Now, I will say, if the Origin form ends up being item locked, I'm actually going to flip the placements on these two. And it's kind of the reason why I'm putting regular Dialga in the B tier for now, is because I think that Dialga Origin is like probably going to end up being the worst A tier. However, I think that regular Dialga is probably going to end up being like the best B tier. In fact, I forgot that I am going to be sorting these. I forgot I did promise that as of the Dark type tier list. So I do need to actually start sorting these. So that's the sorting. It was pretty simple. Moving on to Palkia. Palkia, honestly, I think this could have a lot of merit in this current format. Now, I will say this isn't the best format for Palkia. Palkia definitely does hurt a bit. But I feel like this could be a decent box art counter, especially with Terra. You could get around the dragon weakness and go for like a fairy set or like a water set and outpace a lot of different box art dragons and utilize that to your advantage. You would also tie with a lot of common Pokemon, as 100 is a fairly common speed tier. The bulk is really appreciated. Palkia also, just in general, has a wide coverage pool for random checks, and I think its coverage pool on the dual stab is a lot more appreciated than Dialga's is. I'm going to give Palkia the... Well, actually, I'm going to give Palkia the top of B tier, but I'm going to give Palkia Origin, because of its 120 speed, actually a really high S tier. That 120 speed really does make a difference, actually. And again, this really only matters if they can hold items. I think for what it's worth, if Palkia Origin cannot hold items, I'm going to put Palkia Origin at the top of A tier, and Palkia Base would just be at the bottom of A tier. And we would put Dialga right above it in the A tier. Well, no, we'd put it right above Dialga in the A tier, and the Dialga Origin would just be like the very top of B tier. That's essentially how it would go if the origins for Dialga and Palkia are changed over in 1.2 to where they are required to hold items. But as of right now, they are not. So Palkia Origin is an S tier. At 120 speed tier is incredible. This thing doesn't lose out on any coverage that Palkia gets, because unlike with the PLA transfer, we have it just as a form of Palkia in this game. So everything it gets, both forms get. On top of this as well, Palkia Origin being able to keep the same special attack stat, still hold an item, like this objectively speaking is really good for... Oh wait, hold on. This is defaulting to forcing it to hold the Lustrous Globe. Can we validate that? No, it needs to hold its Lustrous Orb. Ooh, okay, that's interesting. Okay, so the currently Showdown actually is saying it does need to hold a globe. Now, I'm glad I actually validated this, because that does mean, in fact, that we are going to currently swap these tierings. Now, if someone wants to validate this in a version of 1.1 and wants to prove otherwise, I would love to see it. But currently, Showdown is validating it that way, to where it is saying specifically that it does need to hold a globe. So, you know what? I'm gonna do this ranking. I think that realistically, both forms are still incredible. On Palkia Origin hurts a lot less from being item locked than Dialga Origin does, because realistically, boosting those dual stabs is still incredible coverage. And off of the 120 speed, you can throw this on a Tailwind team and it's still a monster. Though I think there's a lot of merit in also Scarf Palkia or Specs Palkia just getting a slightly better damage output or a slightly faster speed tier. So it still is an A tier in all honesty. Giratina gets a C tier, and Giratina Origin gets... Probably, honestly, I feel like you could probably put both in C tier. I think the ground immunity on Giratina is a little bit more appreciated, especially with the higher pace format. In fact, actually, yeah, no, I'm gonna put Giratina actually in the bottom of D tier. No, it's better than Altaria. What am I saying? But Giratina Origin definitely benefits a lot more from just having the better offenses, as well as the ground immunity being more valuable because of how fast-paced this format is. The one exception where Giratina Base would probably be a better option would be for Dozo matchups, because you could pressure stall a bit easier. But even still, like, you would essentially need to burn a Terra on Giratina for this to work. And it's like, do I really want to burn a Terra on Giratina, even if it is for Dozo Giri, when there's probably a better team slot that could do the same role, but better? And the answer is no, you really shouldn't. It's a YouTuber mon. Giratina Origin, though, having the ground immunity could actually be useful. We've seen that work for Hydreigon pretty well, for example, and it could just be a shitty restricted Hydreigon. Which I guess, speaking of Hydreigon, I know Haxorus is next, but we're going to put Hydreigon definitely in the S tier. I'm putting us above Garchomp personally. Despite what the haters say, I still think Hydreigon's better. The Scopeland set is fucking incredible for Dozo. Again, this is what I'm talking about. Like, Hydreigon just is the better version of what Giratina Origin could be by a landslide. I wouldn't compare the two because despite, obviously, Giratina Origin having better bulk, it doesn't have sustainable recovery. Rest got nerfed in PP as well, and VGC never really allows for this to be a good rest mon anyway. The stab combination is a lot more awkward than Hydreigon's because at the very least Hydreigon is, well, no, that's a lie. Actually, Giratina's might be appreciated for Flutter Mane for what it's worth. You could probably essentially pull off the same sort of sets, and the more I'm speaking on it, actually Terra Steel could actually make this actually a good format for Giratina. So we're going to bump them up by 1 each. This could be a decent like Terra Fairy form, and this could be a decent Terra Steel form with Levitate. And I'd even go as far as to put it, no, I'm not going to put it above Ray until we get some actual usage, but Terra Steel could be interesting on Levitator. And it still gets Tailwind, it still gets like the Seek priority, which could be good for the Flutter Mane matchups. Like, I think this could have some merit, but it's still not going to be great. Haxorus. Haxorus gets a C tier. I'm putting it above Giratina. Haxorus is a pretty damn good breaker. You get some priority out of this. Overall, you'll probably make some good Sword Dance sets work, but I think that really, the one thing that benefits Haxorus the most is the fact that it has a wide enough coverage pool to get a really good secondary stab through Terra. And I would never really Terra Dragon this Pokemon, but maybe something like a Terra Poison, Fighting, you name it. But like the point being is something to cover a resistance or an immunity could be really valuable as a Terra option in this. But overall, it still is kind of mediocre compared to the Dragon Pool. It just happens to still be a good Pokemon. It's just a lot of Dragons outclass it C tier. Dragalge also gets a C tier. This has proven to be a pretty good tricking threat actually recently. We've actually seen this even on a couple of rentals that people like, for example, James Beck have been using. Kind of a cool mon, to be honest. I think that the T-Spikes as well in tandem with its offensive nature is really appreciated here, especially in such a Dozo-heavy metagame. It's also a great tricker Pokemon. It's a great Terra abuser. I think it's a decent pick overall. Easy C tier. Noivern with Infiltrator and Tailwind, this alone honestly puts it probably in like the top of C tier. This will definitely be like the best C tier pick. It's kind of just a shitty version of Kilowattrel and Talonflame, but at the same time though, why not just run one of those? For what it's worth, this thing does get one benefit that neither of those Pokemon have, and that's Super Fang. Super Fang is actually pretty cool. Realistically, it helps you break a lot of bulkier shit that you otherwise would have no business breaking, which that in tandem with Taunt and Tailwind does make this actually a fairly good support Tailwinder, which, while Tailwinder is definitely preferred going with the more Talon route and just burning shit, Noivern, weirdly enough, actually isn't the worst option in this regard, just totally for the Super Fang merit. So we'll give it C tier. Goodra. Goodra's definitely a C tier. This is definitely a weaker C tier. In fact, you could even make a case for D tier, but I'm going to give it bottom of C. Just because of the Terra options, you could throw an AV on this mon and it could be kind of cool. I think if I remember correctly, I've seen a couple Goodra going around, at least in Series 1. I don't remember about Series 2, though this might have just been, I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen, there was a few different teams that ran this. Like there was a JV Point team that had it. There was a team that, well, there was another team that had it. There was another team that had it. Yeah, it seems like a lot of these are either like YouTube teams or like regional teams from like early Series 1. The point being that it's okay enough Terramon, realistically. It's a good sponge defensively. Hisui and Goodra, though, that gets the bottom of B tier. The steel typing alone helps us a lot, and you could realistically just, I don't know, the bulk on this is just better, the Fizdef is just better. On top of this as well, I think this benefits more from being a good Trickermer. You could make this thing into a really strong defensive option with like Iron Defense Body Press. Let me double check real quick just to make sure this thing does get the Iron Defense Body Press. It does get Body Press, and it does get the, let's see, I think it gets Shelter. Yep, it gets Shelter, which is essentially just Iron Defense, but it's an exclusive move. So yeah, I mean, you could rank the Iron Defense Body Press sets work, which could actually be pretty decent on this Pokemon. You get stuff like Sap Sipper, which means it's immune to Spore, and also, so that means you can't put it to sleep. You don't need to worry about running a Terra Grass on this thing, which is kind of cool. So you could instead maybe go for something else defensively speaking, like maybe a Terra Fighting for Body Press. The point being is you have a lot of options on this Pokemon. I think all three of its abilities are viable. We'll give this thing definitely a bottom of B tier. Eternatus. Eternatus is a tricky one. I feel like, weirdly enough, this could actually be a good format for it. I do need to just double check a couple things as far as a turn of this. The recover nerf kind of sucks in this mon, but at the same time, you didn't really need it. The one big nerf though for this Pokemon is Meteor Beam, because Meteor Beam sets were probably some of the best sets this thing could run in doubles. I can't lie, that's actually a pretty big nerf for this thing, because it doesn't really get a good way to actually boost its offenses in any sense now. Really, the best way that it has is going for T-Spikes and then Venoshock spamming, which could weirdly enough have some merit, especially with Dozo running around. I don't know. I feel like this is definitely a very bad format for it, considering no Meteor Beam. Like, if it had Meteor Beam, I'd be inclined to put it at like the top of B, bottom of A tier. But at the same time, though, without Meteor Beam, this is kind of a lackluster Pokemon. It's a fast T-Spiker. That's pretty good. Typing would allow for good Terra between Terra Fire, Poison, or Dragon all being kind of okay. Especially a Terra Fire set could be decent, or like a Terra Grass set. But at the same time, though, like, no Meteor Beam does kind of suck in this Pokemon, because it does hurt a lot in terms of box art power creep. I'm going to slot this thing right above Hisui and Gudra in the B tier. I think it's kind of a niche dragon for sure, as far as the box arts go especially, but it's definitely not bad by any means. We're going to put Flapple in the D tier. This is definitely the worst dragon right now in my opinion. I would argue Appleton is slightly better just because of Terra. I think Terra helps this thing a lot, actually, defensively speaking. You could, weirdly enough, make this into a Dozo check as well, which is kind of cool. And especially with Acid Armor, this helps a lot with that Dozo matchup, actually, whereas Flapple needs to rely on Hustle to get damage off, and that's not as accurate. So Flapple is definitely the worst dragon, but the typing is still kind of cool with, like, a Tailwind or, like, a Trick Room team, where you can maybe make it work, I guess, with proper Terra usage. Dragapult. Dragapult definitely gets, like, the top of B tier. Actually, no, this gets like a bottom of A tier. I'd be inclined to even put this thing actually above. No, I'm not going to put it above Dialga and Palkia. I think those have a lot of good trigger merit. Pult, sadly, this is definitely not a great format for Pult. It's turned into a lot more of a support role, similar to how it did towards the end of Generation 8. Which isn't to say it's a bad thing, but I think the fact that power creep has already gotten to that point, it's going to be hard for Pult to kind of get out of that. It still has some decent uses. For one, it's the fastest Pokemon in the format currently, outside of like Electrode, which is pretty good. On top of that as well, you get some Will-O-Wisp support, which is really nice since you can burn stuff really quickly, and in tandem with Hex sets, it's pretty valuable. Terra Steel is a great way to pressure Flutter Mane, and especially with the fact that you do outpace it, it's really good. You can go with Dragonite sets, which are valuable. Terra Ghost is great to give this thing a good physical ghost stab, though you still obviously have the Hex sets, which are decent, especially with T-Spikes being a pseudo-viable status or just a Wisp that it runs itself. So, like, you have some good options on Pult. I think the speed is what's going to carry it into the A tier, truthfully, and the fact that it's not a restricted, so it's not competing for a 1 of 2 slot team, especially when Dragon Spam isn't exactly too unviable to really discount restricted from being the factor for lowering these Pokemon, because there are a lot of teams even right now that are running multiple dragons. So I'm not going to use the typing necessarily as a way to lower the Pokemon, like how Dragapult would maybe be running a competition with another restricted dragon. Instead, I'm counting the restricted slot, because you might not even run a dragon in that slot. You might run like a Xerneas plus a Steel type. If we compare even just Pokemon that are currently in like that Uber's format, right? So that might be Pokemon, I need to go into the unreleased tier. So that might be Pokemon in your restricted slot, like for example, an Arceus form if we're doing like the mythicals, but that's kind of a false equivalency. There might be Pokemon like Calyrex. Both Calyrex forms would be legal. You'd have the Dialga, Palkia, Giratinas, Groudon and Kyogre would be legal. Those are actually really good ones in tandem with the Calyrex forms. You would have Palkia Origin, which even with the orb is still a fairly good one. You would have, let's see. I don't know, that might actually be it. Oh, you know what? Obviously, Koraidon, Miraidon, Zacian, both forms would be kind of viable. Zamazenta would be kind of viable, but not super. The point being is there's a lot of options, and I think that just realistically, when you're considering a restricted slot, a lot of these mons aren't that impressive. But Pult at least isn't the restricted slot, so I'm going to give it the A tier. Regidrago. Regidrago is also actually going to get the A tier. With Terra, this thing is actually kind of a monster. You could tear this into something that's a lot better for defensive typing, like a Steel, a Fire, a Ground, and just use this as a really good counter to Fairies and Steels that would otherwise wall your Dragon set. On top of this as well, Regidrago did get a moveset buff. If I remember correctly, this thing got, it got Earthquake and Earth Power, both of which are strong ways for this thing to clear Steel types that it otherwise did not really have a great way of outside of like Fire Fang. So having that ground coverage is really good for this Pokemon. On top of that, Tailwind is really valuable right now, and Regidrago sitting at a base 80 speed tier does mean that with Tailwind up, you could outpace everything viable. At least everything at +1 that's viable, I should say, which is really good for Regidrago, as this does mean that if you run, actually no, that's a lie, you can't outpace, I don't think you can outpace like the Flutter Mane and Iron Bundle if they're booster energy, but you can outpace pretty much everything, and you could Terra into resistances for those Pokemon too, like a Terra Ice, like a Terra Steel set for example, or like a Terra Poison set, could be a decent defensive check for those Pokemon, and then you also still have a strong stab with Terra Blast to counter those. This is a Pokemon that really does benefit a ton from Terra Blast. Not to the level that Lucky will, which Lucky will get to a centralizing level with Terra Blast, but Regidrago will still actually be a fairly decent dragon in my opinion. I'm cautiously putting it at the bottom of A tier, but truthfully, if we saw Regidrago as like a top 20 Pokemon, I wouldn't exactly be surprised by it, but I think there's enough better dragons, at least enough more consistently better dragons, to where Regidrago will just be like a meta fad that people will run. I just don't think that it will be like a thing that everyone is running. So I'm going to give it A tier. Speaking of things that are meta fads, Baxcalibur, another meta fad. This one actually gets above Pult for what it's worth. I'm actually going to put this thing right above Salamence even. Realistically, this is a really good anti-meta mon, and truthfully, I would say among the entire decks, this is currently, for all the non-home Pokemon, the most anti-meta Pokemon we've had. Bax has a funny way of always being viable. Weirdly enough, no matter what's actually running around the tier, Bax will find a way to adapt and then run through Pokemon. Whether it's Flutter Mane teams, whether it's bundled teams, whether it's fucking Iron Hands. Like, this thing has a weird way of adapting to the format, and I don't like it, but it's an objectively good Pokemon. The ability of not being able to be burned is a pretty good niche over a lot of physical attackers. It's a great Dragon Dance user, especially in tandem with like a really good Redirector. This is an incredibly obnoxious Pokemon to KO, so I'm definitely going to give it the A tier. Tatsugiri. Tatsugiri alone doesn't really get a good rating. However, Tatsugiri with Dondozo, on the other hand, is the typically way you are playing Tatsugiri, so we're going to have this thing the bottom of S tier. I think realistically right now, that, well no, I'm actually going to put it above Garchomp and Hydreigon. I'm putting Dragonite above it though, just because I think that Dragonite is a lot more consistent in its own right. Now, if we were tiering Dondozo, which, actually, no, I don't know if I want to go that route, because I think that opening up that can of worms is a pretty dangerous one, because then we start having to tier stuff off of cores, and I don't really want to use the core, well, I don't really want to use the core argument for just Tatsugiri and not other Pokemon, when that isn't a pretty important aspect to tier things off of, especially when we get into stuff like Mouseape or like Talontusk, for example. So I'm gonna actually put this above Dragonite. It's still not above Arceus. Arceus is fucking nuts. This would need to be a pretty insane Pokemon to be hitting above Arceus, which it's not. It's definitely not. But Tatsugiri still is incredible. It's one of the most centralizing cores right now as far as the metagame goes, which is weird because I know a lot of people said that Tatsugiri would fall off, and I don't even think the order up nerf will cause it to fall off, weirdly enough. I think it's still gonna be an incredible Pokemon. I put Tatsugiri Orange on, but truthfully they all would be the same ranking because it's just another way of using Dondozo, which is another reason I was thinking like Dozo benefits a lot more from this ranking than Tatsugiri does. Just because of the fact that you could tailor the Tatsugiri into Dondozo. So of the two, Dozo is objectively the more viable one, despite Tatsugiri having a lot better solo matchups. But it's just because of the fact that you can tailor Dondozo so much more particularly off of the Tatsugiri, which I guess it's a chicken and egg situation, because it really depends on how you value that. Do you value that Tatsugiri can make Dondozo so viable? Or do you value that Dondozo is so viable because of Tatsugiri, and it becomes a more viable Pokemon than Tatsugiri ever could be? It's really weird. Honestly, if I realistically could put Tatsugiri anywhere in this S tier, but I'm going to put it right above Dragonite. I think it's where I'm going to fall with it. Cyclizar. Cyclizar gets a D tier. It's front of D tier because of Shed Tail, but this is a shitty Shed Tail user. I think Orthworm is objectively better in doubles, solely for the fact that you have the ground immunity, which is pretty okay on Trick Room teams for it, and also the fact that it's recovery. I don't really think that Cyclizar is that good. It's too slow to be a fast Pokemon, and I know that 121 and saying that's a too slow Pokemon to be a fast Pokemon is really weird, but anything that's not passing like Talon, or at least Meowscarada levels of speed, is a slow Pokemon in this format. Even Meowscarada I wouldn't say is a fast Pokemon. Like, I'm thinking of Pokemon like Booster Energy Roaring Moon, Booster Energy really on most speedy Paradox Pokemon, Talonflame, Flutter Mane, Iron Bundle, Dragapult, like those are the fast Pokemon in this format. I would not say Cyclizar is, because of the fact that unlike Pokemon like Roaring Moon that have a lower base speed than it, Cyclizar doesn't really have a good way to boost its speed. You really need to be running like a Scarf with this. I don't think it's that good. Its offenses are kind of piss poor. Its signature move is fucking nuts. It's an incredible signature move, genuinely a broken signature move. But I don't think this is the best abuser of it in PGC. So we're gonna give it D tier. Final mon today is gonna be Roaring Moon. This is an objective S tier. I'm putting it right above Dragonite. I think Dozo is still a little more centralizing, weirdly enough. And I think that Roaring Moon has kind of hit the peak where people are slowly weaning off of it. For Pokemon like King Gambit, Great Tusk, etc. Now this is still an incredible Pokemon, but I think it's really more so meant to be a good way to clear through like your first couple games in a tournament, or like farming through early ladder. It's just meant to be a noob killer, essentially, is what it is. And it's a really fucking good one. But I don't think it holds up as well in high ladder personally in comparison to a lot of these other S tiers do. Whereas I think a lot of the other S tiers that we have today, these are Pokemon that I think outright will turn games over in the right player's hands. Roaring Moon just, it really doesn't do that against high skill. Like if you were to take a high skill player versus a high skill player, you don't really have that happening with any Pokemon. Well, specifically with Moon, you don't have that happening with. Anything else could, in theory, snowball a match in this tier. And I just don't think Moon has that. Though it is objectively the best noob slayer, it is the most versatile Terra Pokemon in the entire Dex right now, I would argue. But yeah, I don't know. I think that Moon is just, weirdly enough, it's a better support Pokemon than it is an offensive piece. But that might just be a hot take. The point being, though, is I think that Moon is fine, but it's just, I don't know. I'm personally underwhelmed by it. Let me know what you guys think down below, and if you enjoy this and you want to see more tier lists like it, leave a like and subscribe. Answer the comment question of the day, and I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video. Shout out to channel members being Josh K Ultra Player, Mia, Zeke0, Matt O'Shea, and Slade. Not Slade, Koemi. Your guys' support is greatly appreciated, and if you want to become a channel member, a couple dollars a month. The channel members, your guys' video got delayed a bit because I'm trying to make sure that it is worthwhile to the amount of money you would be paying for. So I'm delaying it until March, and I'm going to try and do these on a 2-week backlog. So we're going to put it in March instead. So hopefully you guys enjoy that. I'm sorry for the delay. But we'll see you guys in tomorrow's video. Until then, peace out, guys.